You are arguing this like a rational actor.
That's what I'm saying.
Part of my prediction is in 2025
is
embracing or acknowledging that chaos reigns. Hello and welcome to another episode of the BetaKit podcast. I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit, and along with my co-host, Ghost of Tech Future, Rob Kenedi, we have peered deep into our crystal balls to bring you tech predictions for 2025. Now, this is coming hot after our 90-minute long multiple take recording session 2024 year in review, where we both identified the biggest tech stories and offered letter grades to a variety of organizations for their performance throughout the year. So this one's going to be a little bit shorter and maybe a little referential to that episode. We shall see. So here's what we're going to do. We've got 4 predictions ready to go. We got 2 of the classic BetaKit podcast tech predictions, pure chalk, straightforward, basic predictions. And then in the back end, we're going to hit you with our spicy hot predictive take. And then we are going to blow this thing, go home, and then we're going to see you in 2025 to figure out if we were right. Okay, Rob, I was thinking maybe we would start by even just like acknowledging last year's tech predictions, but I feel like we did that pretty conclusively in our 2024 review episode, where we were like, everything that we talked about last year, we're talking about this year. So we're just going to blow right past that. I want to begin.
That was a 4-hour episode we recorded and smushed it down to 1 hour somehow.
It's actually still going.
It's a multi-day.
While we're recording this one, people are still
in fact, if you listen in the background, you might hear us recording it.
Absolutely. We'll keep recording it until we get it right. The podcasting will continue until morale improves.
And we are sober. This is the middle of the day. There's no Christmas anything yet or holiday anythings. This is completely straight.
Frankly, I think we did a better job when we did it late in the evenings during the pandemic, a little buzzed. But
when we lost our voices, yeah,
it's neither here nor there. Okay, we're gonna keep it nice and tight. We're gonna start with the basic predictions. We're gonna keep this clean, coming out swinging here. Rob, hit me with your first tech prediction of 2025.
I think that 2025 will be the year that we start to see AI agents making their way into our daily lives. When I say daily, I may mean daily work lives, not our daily home lives. But we'll actually start to see AI robots doing things for you, even if they're rudimentary tasks. And you'll be able to use them to send emails, to respond to people, to generate things, to make reservations or something like that. So very, very rudimentary use cases, but I think the technology will be just ready for prime time, maybe by this time next year.
Okay, I think that's totally fair. I think that makes sense. I wouldn't even say that that's a little. I actually think that's where the AI industry says where they're going. You know, we've talked before about this open conversation. It's getting much more difficult for them to improve their large language models. They have no more internet left to scour. They've been exploring fabricating data to train on. Yeah. And now it seems like the conversation has shifted to, hey, the conversational interaction is important, but what we really just want to do is like tell the robot to go do a thing and it automates it for us, which is, I think, maybe much less ethically compromised at this moment. But then also when you see AI agents negotiating with people on the phone and speaking untruths could still trend that way. But I think you've actually nailed it here when we've got a lot of companies looking to push agents as the next iteration beyond their current chatbot interface.
It's like one of those things where it's like it'll be in both states at once. Like, I don't know if you remember the Google I.O. from, 2020, when they're like, look, it will call the restaurant and book for you. That's like 5 years ago. That's before ChatGPT did their big launch. So there's been never-ending release of these things. Like, and don't forget, OpenAI, we talked about this in the last episode, but OpenAI have their 12 days of OpenAI. And it was a couple of days ago where they announced Sora, which is their text-to-video tool. They announced the public availability of it. But they actually announced that like 8 months ago. And so lots of startups have come in between, and other titans have come in between and generated things. So what we actually see and when we actually see it are very questionable. Like, I really think it'll be like this time next year before we actually are doing anything with anything.
Okay.
You know
so you're not predicting like this is the new de facto state. It's like a lot of companies are going to try this. And, we haven't really talked about the Rabbit device on the podcast this year because it's like a giant, it's just running virtual. It's just a really fancy piece of plastic that overheats that connects to a virtual machine to do stuff to log in on your behalf.
Nuclear plant.
Your point on the Google I/O is really awesome. All of the, HomeKit enabled speaker stuff that we've seen from Google, Apple, Amazon was all predicated on this idea that like, hey, you just need a speaker that you can put a request into, and then computer does thing, whether it's order groceries, set the lights, play some music, stuff like that. This is a actual more natural extension of like utility, but it's not going to be evenly distributed or default here. Is there anyone that you're looking at for next year that you think might be, and this is where we get a little spicier with the prediction, the one to lead on agents? Is there an agent leader, a large agent leader that you're you're looking
LOL
at for 2025?
So many LOLs. That's a great question. I think there's the big, it's really interesting. I'm actually finishing the monologue up for my next episode. And this is one of the things I'm talking about. And if you look at OpenAI versus Microsoft versus Google, they're in wildly different views of what this agent is, from really annoying to, I could sort of see that. The thing that OpenAI announced yesterday as a recording of this podcast, so 2 years ago, by the time this airs, two tech dog years ago, was you could share your iPhone screen with ChatGPT and it'll see what you're looking at, which is really weird.
Just looking for fields, man. It's just looking for fields to input stuff into.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in startup land. I think it's startup land. The stuff that was announced at YC the last week, that's where the really interesting stuff is going to be coming from, because these big companies, before they drop something on you, like look how long it took to get iOS 18.2, which now asks ChatGPT a question for you, which came out again yesterday or 2 days ago as of recording this show. And Apple announced it in the summer. These folks are moving very slowly. So I think like looking at the YC companies that are coming out, looking at I'm sure BetaKit's got some coverage on some of these really interesting companies, Canadian companies and companies that are coming back to Canada that are doing really very specific tasks. Like one I know of is, I'm not going to name it because they didn't pay. They didn't pay for the sponsorship.
What are you guys doing?
Does outbound SDR work and sort of has like unlimited. Imagine the idea of unlimited SDRs. So you don't hire one or you don't hire two. Imagine if you had an infinite number of SDRs doing outbound for you, and then dealing with a bit of the responses for that outbound. That's a totally different worldview. It's not like we're automating a thing that you did, which is a lot of what these agent examples are. Like, we'll surf the web for you. Cool. You know who can surf the web for me? Me.
Yeah.
But having an infinite amount of robots to call everyone who's in my ICP, that's a messed up thing. Yeah. And so that's where I think the cool stuff is coming from.
Yeah. We've talked so many times about human behaviors that get broken by tech's scale and speed, and sales teams are definitely a great example of that. But you're right though, it's a different fork from the generative AI stuff, where in that environment we're looking at misinformation, disinformation, just a glut of like low quality blah, because it's so theoretically cheap to produce. There's deep costs on the back end when it comes to energy or just even.
Do you know it's a half a liter of water? I believe it's a half a liter of water for 4 queries or 1 to 4 queries. You're dumping out a half a liter of water to do a query with ChatGPT.
Refer you to our interview with the ethics lead for Hugging Face about some of the considerations there.
Sasha, yeah.
But this agent situation is a different type of scale, where we're just going to have little like armies of bots to do things for us. And I think in this, it's much more directly easier to evaluate the value. Did the agent complete the task? Did they screw it up? Was it
Did they
worth the
murder
cost
everybody?
for the agent? Yeah. Did they break the boundaries of their constraints? Did they go kind of off off the army base on a rogue mission? Did they lone wolf their way to complete things? We're really getting into the fun sci-fi stuff here. We're gonna speed run the last 50 years of speculative fiction. But I want to go back just finally to the one other interesting thing that's contained in your prediction. This idea that it might not be like the large tech companies that we're paying attention to, or the new emergence like OpenAI or Anthropic that'll do this stuff. It's going to be the other startups right now that are looking at the platform field that these companies are laying out and saying, oh, we can build a really great hot shit product like this. Like even just you look at like a Zapier or something like that, where they're just like, oh yeah, we're going to be the place for this. Do you see that as like kind of what we saw in the app explosion in the mobile years, where it's like you lay out the app stores, you lay out and then people are just selecting really, really cool agents. It's like, what agents do you have for you? Agent of the week.
That's a really good question. I think I think step one, I think we're still at, especially with agents, I think we're at the, look, I can drink a fake beer and have a fart app version of the app store, right?
Fart
We're like,
era.
remember, if you're old enough, you may remember that was the thing for the app store. Look, I can tilt my phone and the accelerometer makes it look like I'm drinking a beer. Isn't that amazing?
Or I spent $1,000 for this app just to prove that I'm wealthy, which might actually even like the closer correlation to the fart. It's the really expensive fart.
Exactly. So I think we've learned, so there's going to be a lot of B2B. But right now, if you have a slight amount of knowledge, you can use these tools and you don't need to be particularly solving big problems. This is like how it seems to me any tech market starts. So you can solve one problem, especially with some of these new concepts. Again, infinite agents is a new concept. It's just not something you could do before.
Yeah.
So what happens if you have an infinity agent? And what happens if, Douglas, you also have infinity agents? What happens in the world? So there's these new concepts.
It's just a Neil Stephenson
the barrier
novel,
to entry
man.
from a tech, exactly. And the barrier to entry for startups is at the moment very, very, very low. So you're going to see a lot of this kind of froth in terms of like, will you have an AI agent app store? I mean, I'm sure that each one of the like big behemoths wants you to go through them to do the thing. The question is, like most of these early iterations, I believe they're going to be features, not companies. So you'll be able to take some money off the table, but most of them will go away either by falling apart, being bought as part of a larger play.
Yeah, the visual voicemail agent that gets that's a hot commodity, and all of the calendar email agents. Wait for that.
But I mean, you see these patterns too. You've been around as long as me. Do you disagree, or you think like, no, he's totally the same thing over again?
I like what you're seeing, and I like how it's this. That's all of this happens in dialogue. This is a grand dialectic that often leads to a really stupid conversation. But we can see people coming in right now and being like, okay, again, we've talked about all of this. The AI hardware race is so CapEx intensive. It's kind of already been won. We can't play in this space. There are major platform decisions being made. Apple is offering distribution. Google is its own distribution. Microsoft's happy to be in the game. Where can this plucky young team of 4 university dropouts participate? Make the best agent in the world. Make the thing that everyone uses that proves out the power of this technology in the way that people proved out the power of mobile and the power of the cloud. To your point of it won't be the big tech companies that drop the interesting agent next year. I think part of that is due to my prediction, which is that next year, one big tech company will be smacked by antitrust. And I don't mean sued. I mean, they're going to get smacked. Something's going to be split up. There will be meaningful pain. And I know in the last episode, Rob, and I actually don't know if we cut it or not. Again, our 2024 year in review podcast is still being reviewed and edited and recorded
in 2024
as we speak. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But you had made the point that Microsoft in the late 90s and 2000s in the big browser antitrust case didn't actually feel direct effects from that antitrust case. It was more the great distraction and the years of belaboring that caused problems. But they didn't actually break up Internet Explorer from Windows, which people don't know, it was an operating system that was pretty prominent back in the day. Internet Explorer was a browser.
It's a browser.
Yeah. I don't think that everyone is going to get got this time between the Microsoft, Google, Apple, Meta, Amazon stack of antitrust cases that we went through in the 2024 year in review episode, but I think one will. And it's either going to be as a lesson to the others, one that fails to kiss the Trump ring, or, one that Trump beats up on the first day of school to really teach the other companies to get in line. And I think, these are the sub predictions. I think the one that gets got is Google for two reasons. One, they've got a lot of cases. They've just got a lot of cases. So just pure batting average here. But I think it's also hard to see how their business model is anything other than a series of monopolies. Whereas many of these other companies can effectively argue, yes, they are dominant, but in the phone space, Apple is dominant while still not being the majority control, or circumstances like that, where it's Google. It's like, oh yeah, you own everything. You own every component of the advertising space. You completely dominate in search, and I think that would be a company where, if ever there was to be some sort of repercussion for market dominance, to slide that invisible hand in there and squeeze, it would be Google.
Interesting. So do you think it's I could see that, like, politically, it's like, notwithstanding Elon Musk, who, even though he runs X, it's not a very big player here, to be totally honest. It is the FANG style companies. And so I guess we know that Zuckerberg went to Mar-a-Lago. We know that Tim Apple has more frequently met up with Trump, I think, than Sundar.
I believe the information reported that Google was just meeting with the Trump administration again this week.
Right. But yeah, I mean, everyone is doing that. But we saw, like, for example, right before the election, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, didn't endorse anybody in anticipation of maybe somebody winning.
Well, he did a little bit more than that, Rob. He also killed the publication that he owned from endorsing someone else.
Yes,
which is important.
Exactly. I was saying it more abstractly, but you're absolutely right. And so, like, that chilling effect has already started happening, and people have already started acting in response to that. So I don't know. Google seems like the least political actor of them all for some reason. I don't know. Like, Zuckerberg is a social network, and they've had their odds with Trump. But the other thing is that it's interesting because they're not, as far as I know, there's no investigation into Meta and their advertising practices, even though they hold a huge chunk. It's Google and Meta. Those are the two.
They also have a suit with the SEC, right? But I think, again, maybe more to your point, Google is way less personality driven in its leadership. And this is a subset of Alphabet.
It's not DOJ investigating their anti-competitive practices in advertising, is the point I'm making about Meta.
No.
Versus, you know what I mean?
I actually think it's the SEC control the rest of with Meta, so it's a little different. Sure. But I think, to your point, right? Like, if you've got a room full of CEOs and you would evaluate them on their willingness to hang out with Trump and make sure that their company's fine, or accidentally piss off Trump and then leads to a circumstance. And it's so horrible that we are evaluating tech policy and economic stuff along, like, does this guy like you enough? But that's the world that we exist in this liminal space between 2024 and 2025. I would say that the two there would be Google and Apple. Apple's got the whole China manufacturing thing going on, but Google is like, if there was ever a giant turkey target that Trump could go to and say, hey, break this stuff up, that would actually leave the rest of the tech ecosystem quite happy, because they have been unable to compete in the markets that Google dominates. I don't know. That would be.
Do you think, like, they're actually, because this is the other question. I mean, like, let's argue this on the merits for just a second, forget the personalities, but if we're just to put that aside and know that it is affecting it quite substantially, what about do you actually think this all started when, years ago, right? Under Lena Khan, but, like, it was like years ago, I think it actually started in the Trump administration.
The
previous
Google cases
Trump
started,
administration.
at least one of them started in the Trump administration.
I don't know if it was the search or the ads one, but all of this is like predicated on a very specific, like if you have to dominate search to dominate advertising. You can't decouple, like if you don't have search anymore, it doesn't matter what your ad platform does because you don't have the eyeballs to serve it up, right?
Yeah, which is why we talked about like why they're asking to say is like, well, they're so dominant in search. Let's take away
Chrome,
either the Chrome browser or Android, which are interesting.
So here's my question to you: like, do you think this reminds me a bit of Microsoft because OpenAI has a search now. There's Perplexity. A lot of these companies are releasing searchy like objects. By the time they get to anything, I mean, won't the case have petered out from a technical perspective? Because they're just like, well, maybe we were dominant here, but we're actually.
Are you saying that your first prediction is going to Uno reverse my prediction, and like search won't really matter by the time we've talked about it? There's entirely a circumstance in which the slow wheels of justice turn far too late, and the market has already broken this out. But again, that's assuming that it is the search case is the one that goes. The easier one might be like couldn't you see the Trump administration being like, oh my God, the Google search dominance is such a mess. Let's just kill them on the ad stuff. Let's just bang them there.
Fair. I guess what I'm saying is like, are they? I understand that there's YouTube, which is the second biggest search engine in the world. I totally get that, but I guess what I'm wondering is search and advertising are two sides of the same coin. You can't have ads if you don't have places to display them, and you don't have a business model where you're giving away the search for free unless somebody's paying. So if by the time they get to Remedy Town, and I know we're getting there, not on the search side, we are there, on the advertising side, not yet. Do you not think that they'll just be like, well, listen, this with OpenAI search, this is a very well capitalized company. It's worth $150 billion. They're a competitor too. So now we have competition in search, which means we have competition in ads, which means you shouldn't break us up.
You are arguing this like a rational actor.
That's what I'm saying.
Part of my prediction in 2025 is embracing or acknowledging that chaos reigns. Fair. So I have absolutely no idea, which is why because I basically picked the field here, and then I made one of those additional like pro line bets to like pick who gets really nailed in the fourth quarter. But right. I'm picking the field here, right? And I'm not doing it. I'm like I am not saying here evaluating the cases the DOJ has the best chance against this, or I'm literally saying one of these people is going to upset President Trump or not be willing to kowtow, and they will be the one that everyone else sells out so that they stay safe. Yes. Final sub prediction to close this off, and then we'll get to the really spicy stuff, which I think we're doing quite well if this is the chalk. Sub prediction: Matt Boswell, Commissioner of Competition in Canada, will be unsuccessful in his antitrust case against Google because nothing changes in Canada.
Copy and paste, replace the use.
Yeah,
we're good.
Yeah, the free Boswell t-shirt will reign supreme in 2025 again, sadly. A successful Canadian entrepreneur is offered millions from Silicon Valley for his data and analytics business. As CEO Tom Oliver considers the deal, he is targeted by an unknown perpetrator, and his friend, homicide detective Jason Liu, must strive to keep him safe. This is not a BetaKit story, folks. This is the plot of Devious Web, a new Canadian tech thriller by author Shelley Grandy. If you are looking for a last-minute gift for your colleagues or family, visit shelleygrandy.com to order your copy today. And to settle the mystery of how a Canadian author was so inspired to write about Toronto tech, well, this author is the mother of Willful founder and former BetaKit managing editor, Aaron Burry. Walk, don't run to shelleygrandy.com today. Link in the show notes. Okay, Rob, here it is. This is the big stuff. We got a pretty good warm up. We got some deep introspection here. But what is your spicy take? What's your spicy prediction for 2025. Let's get weird with it on the back end.
I go
of this
first,
pod.
eh?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
This is somewhat sensible and somewhat stupid, mostly stupid.
Excellent.
Shopify will buy Cohere.
Whoa!
Shopify will buy Cohere.
Darian,
Why?
can we get some sound the alarm effects? Wow! My God, I wish I had gone first. I am so embarrassed with what my mistake will be. Explain to me, Jesus Christ, Rob! Look at you, buddy.
In a stock-only transaction, Cohere. I'm just kidding.
No, explain to me how you think that this is going to break out, sir.
I think that based on the last episode, I guess you have to listen to this. The last episode and this episode as a 95-hour holiday listen and compilation.
Like, after you've done rewatching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you put on the Two Towers, which is these two podcasts. No, come on. Explain to us why and how you think Shopify buys.
Here's the math. Here's the logic. Independent of the fact that it's very well capitalized and they have a lot of money and they're probably very expensive. Cohere can't compete. It's very hard I shouldn't say it can't compete. It is hoeing an impressive road, and
it is competing
against a lot of capital.
The big more ones. Capitalized, yes.
The best capitalized companies on the planet. And so it needs capital, space, market, all the things. And so they're like, what would be nice? Having the second or third, whatever it is today, wealthiest company in the country that has a pretty big freaking niche on its side. So, hey, it's the AI team for Shopify. We've got a market, we've got much more capital, and we now have the opportunity to move mountains. On the Shopify side, their growth is predicated on beyond B2 SMB. So they need to get enterprise customers. Who does Cohere serve? Enterprise customers. Wouldn't it be amazing if their enterprise play was focused on retail, like that old company, RubaCloud, that old startup in our ecosystem, the Canadian ecosystem? Focus on retail, aim that AI not at all enterprise, aim it at retail specifically or e-com. And you already have some enterprise clients, I assume, get rid of the non-retail ones. And all of a sudden, you have a new reason to work with Shopify and enterprise.
I like this because it would piss off Oracle and Salesforce even more than I think Shopify has been doing recently. To your point, we've been covering Shopify's earnings, how big of a deal it is that they're with, I guess, what was formerly Shopify Plus, but they don't really use that brand anymore, that they've been adding these larger and larger enterprise retailers, obviously solving, like they've gone in and helped companies that have been hacked or faced cyber threats and like rebuilt their e-commerce platforms for them. There's deeper integrations there. It's interesting because there'd be some downstream impacts on Cohere here, another Canadian AI focused company. But I think, they're worth about $5.5 billion.
What's the market cap of Shopify today?
Shopify could pop that off pretty easily. I don't think they've made an acquisition of that size before, but it's within the realm of possibility. Good job, Rob. Remind people again where they can listen or watch the Decelerator show. Is it decelerator.media?
Thanks for the plug.
Because you didn't do that on the top end. You're saying on my next show. Like, I think that prediction deserves a little bit of a sub plug there.
I was going to say I didn't pay for the plug. And by the way, Shopify's market cap as of recording is $147 billion. So what's like $5 billion, $6 billion?
Keep it. Let's all keep it in house. Keep it in Toronto.
All stock. Go to decelerator.media. That is a top level domain. I have to keep saying that to people. That is actually a place.
You didn't pay for it, Rob, but you earned it. Okay. Well, $7. Crap.
What's yours?
I know this is such a Douglas thing. I really wish I should have spent more time on X, and maybe I could have come up with a couple more exceptional things. Okay, hear me out.
Panic. Mine was panic driven.
I know in our 2024 episode, I just gave the federal government innovation policy an F or an incomplete. My prediction is the liberal government in 2025 will win another election. Whoa. And our wait for effective innovation policy will continue into the back end of this decade. Here's how I think this is going to go. Here's how this scenario would play out. in the first 6 months of 2025, possibly within the first 6 days, Trump is going to do something really, really stupid. Something's going to break. The repercussions of the Doge environment, like cutting 80% of whatever social service or government body, or maybe they try to do that to military spending, and let's see how that goes. Something breaks, and we get the immediate reaction in Canada of, not like that. We see an immediate public turnaround from Canadian tech leaders from, what would a Doge look like in Canada? Be like, these aren't our values. Come to Canada again. And we're right back in the 2017, 2018 narrative. The last remaining liberal bastion in Western democracy, Justin Trudeau, somehow scores major points again in contrast to Trump. Pierre Poilievre gets dragged into the swamp of the across the border relationship status that they're dipping their toes in. Dan DeBow, Shopify VP, realizes that no one actually at this point wants to be the 51st state of the United States of America. And then Teflon Trudeau gets in under another election.
Ooh.
Subcomponent, this is all predicated on Mark Carney, Canada's banker with a heart, taking over finance, showing some sort of fiscal discipline and possibly the capacity to execute on some of these commitments, which again settles a lot of the rabble rousing from the business community, changes the productivity narrative. And then Trudeau, on what he's like, again, been able to do for a decade, weaves this sort of like social Canadian policy narrative in a way that allows people to give him, or if not him, the Liberal government another term.
Minority or majority in this story?
Probably a minority again.
Yeah.
Just given the way that, because again, we didn't have election reform. So, and I'll also note here, in no way am I advocating for this. Similar to picking the fields in my first prediction, I can see a scenario where all of the ping pong balls bounce against each other and then casually and confidently walking right through the middle of that chaos is Justin Trudeau saying a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I think my spicy prediction after on the last podcast saying that this federal government's innovation policy over the last decade has been an effort and incomplete. Yeah. And then writing the epitaph for this federal government's innovation policy, which I'm set to do before December 31st. I am saying that somehow, some way, this Liberal government will remain and probably remain ineffective when it comes to innovation policy. But we will see other things happen around the world that create a circumstance that gives Trudeau another kick at the can.
I like it. I think I think I agree with you. Ping pong balls are, who would have predicted what else is going on in the States, for example?
It's no Shopify buying Cohere, but it's one of those like 4-team teases where you're like, if just everything goes right.
Yeah, you're right. I never actually
if everything breaks the right way.
Exactly. I mean, isn't that like everything with all this stuff, the startups and whatever? It's like right place, right time, right lighting.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're absolutely right. God knows what it's going to happen in the first quarter. Maybe we enter into a trade war. Does that change the dynamic of this conversation?
And I'll be clear here. Some of the conditions that must be met for this to happen are truly terrible things that will harm people. Like when I say that Trump does something stupid or breaks a component of the US government to put the Doge agenda on the back foot, that's not a good thing. But I think there's a high likelihood of that happening quicker than maybe how we saw things kind of mess up in the last Trump administration. And again, our national identity is defined in contrast to the Americans.
Yes.
I think that will be the prompt to a pendulum swing, if not back to 2017 fully, at least a little bit more like, oh man, I know I know we want a new government, but we don't want that.
Question.
And that plus Mark Carney might be enough.
Question. One day after all this transpires, are we going to have mega clusters? What's the innovation policy then?
Sponsored by Rogers. That is a deep cut joke that isn't funny even to me, but I would say it's really tough because again, I'm not even saying that we'll actually get effective innovation policy here. I'm actually just saying that the federal government responsible for our current ineffective will continue.
Yeah, so I know.
We are recording this like literally on the Friday before the fall economic statement drops. Also, we are waiting right now for Minister Freeland to make a public appearance on some stuff that we said, like when it comes to that list of things that have yet to happen, when it comes to shred review or open banking or the CIC or a bunch of other stuff, you might actually see some of that in the fall economic statement. I actually won't know until after this podcast is released, which makes this a more honest prediction.
Should we do two takes? One is like, of course. And the other one is like, oh, no.
No. If there's one thing that we've learned about these predictions is that they're only good
for the 20 minutes after
you consume.
Record the show. Yeah.
If there was ever an episode of the BetaKit podcast that was directly equivalent to Chinese food, immediately after you consume this, you will be like, could do with a little something more, guys.
What were they thinking?
Okay. But that is I think, honestly, in a tighter format, one of our more entertaining predictions episodes. We will also be doing early in January a like big tech questions of the year, where we'll be a little bit more detailed and kind of tracking the tendrils of this. But we gave you antitrust. We gave you AI agents. We gave you a major Canadian tech acquisition and like political prognosis. So I don't know what else you expect from us in the middle of December. I think we're doing quite well. But if you have a different tech prediction, if you, again, are like, let me go back and listen to that 2024 year in review episode. If you have big stories that you thought we missed, stories that you would like us to continue into the new year, you got to hit us up a couple different ways. Leave a comment on YouTube. Leave a comment in Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Email us, podcast@betakit.com. We literally read everything you send us. We would love to hear from you on this stuff. Because I think, again, chaos will reign. And I think we should all hold hands and experience it together next year. The BetaKit podcast is brought to you by BetaKit Incorporated. Episodes are produced and edited by Darian McDonald. Your hosts are Rob Kenedi and me, Douglas Saltis. For more great reporting on Canadian tech and tech from a Canadian perspective, go to betakit.com.